Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2020 film The Last Matinee, and is currently available on Shudder when I'm doing this review, and that's where I watched it as well. Because this is a 2020 film, it's newer, so I'm not going to do spoilers in this, but if you've already seen the film, I have a little extra information in there that only people who have really seen the film would understand fully. But that said, you can watch it either way, if you've seen it or if you haven't. I do recommend this film. I think it's a solid fun time. It's nothing like deep. It's nothing that you're going to be like, whoa, big twist in the end. There's really none of that stuff going on. It's just a pretty straightforward, fun slasher film, which some people may say it's Giallo inspired, it's Giallo-esque, or even call it Giallo. It's not Giallo. There are flashes of Giallo to it, but I would definitely say it's a slasher film, and as we all know, the slasher genre was informed by Giallo, so just by being a slasher, it's going to be kind of Giallo-ish in certain ways. So getting into it, this was directed by Maximiliano Contenti, who also did a film called Neptunia, sorry. Also written by Contenti as well as Manuel Facal, who also wrote scripts for Akuras, High Five, and Fiesta Nibiru. These are all films I've never seen before. It is a Spanish language film from Uruguay. I think that's how it's correctly said. Most people say Uruguay. I think it's Uruguay. But for that reason, there are subtitles, yes, to the film. But I will say this. If you're not big on subtitles, there are very long stints where there's nobody talking. So the subtitles aren't a lot in this film. I really think it's tolerable for people who aren't into subtitled films. Unless you're someone who just can't do subtitles at all. Like my mother, who has like migraine issues that are triggered by reading on the screen. So, quick synopsis. It's a pretty simplistic story, really. It's about a bunch of people who are at a theater, at a matinee, and there's a killer who shows up and is coming after them. That's it. And there's no, like I said, like there's no big twists or anything to it, but it is fun, and there's some really cool things done in the film. So I do recommend. There are so many opening company graphics in this. I kind of thought it's kind of got to be a joke. I hope it was kind of like a jokey thing. Like, you know, in the beginning where it will say, like, you know, I'll just make up a word like Horror Film Cinema Presents or International Film Society. You know, they just keep having like those cards of like all the organizations and studios involved in the making of the film. There were so freaking many of those. I've never seen so many of those done before a film before. So I was thinking, I hope that is like done as a tongue-in-cheek thing, because it seems like it. The title font on the title card in the beginning is very 70s. It has a very 70s feel. Specifically, it's trying to channel Argento here and there, and you may see specific films kind of specifically called out. Like there actually is a part, if you note, there's like a stairway in the theater that has a bunch of, like on the first landing, it has a bunch of posters, and one of them is Dario Argento's Opera. The other thing is there's a shot at one point when the killer kind of like shows up kind of early on that looks like his silhouette's kind of backlit in a way in a theater that reminds you a lot of the film Demons, because there's a specific shot in Demons much like that, and I kind of think that inspiration was taken there, especially because, you know, you see the opera poster in there. So yeah, I think there's also another reason for the opera poster to be showing in there, and that's because of what the opera poster shows. Now, that said, I'm not going to go any further than that, but yeah, for people who want to figure it out, you can look it up and try and figure it out. The music is super over-the-top, dread-filled stuff to start out. Now, that is kind of like the thing, that was kind of like the film, you know, the stuff of the time that they're trying to hit, with like it being kind of 70s slasher-ish. But the interesting thing is they actually set the film in 1993. So it's kind of interesting. So it really feels like a meshing of decades. It feels like it's 70s and, to a lesser degree, 90s. But yeah, it's kind of a meshing of 70s, 90s. But the music is very over the top. But it kind of plays as like, not like it's annoying, more like it's appropriate for the style and what they're trying to do. And it is, once again, kind of tongue-in-cheek, in my opinion. Very intriguing setup that makes you feel like a mystery will drive the pacing of the film. Now, that ends up not being the case. Like, it's not mystery driven. It's more, do you like slashers? Do you like to see some cool kill scenes? Which, if the answer to that is yes, then check this out, because it's a fun slasher and the kills are very good. That is when the film shines the most. The kills. The kills by far. There are lots of slow motion. There's lots of slow motion at a certain point in this, and then a lot of close-ups done as well, which, if you're me, those get a little tiresome from time to time, so that's something that bothered me a little bit, but that was more in the beginning of the film, and then it kind of started to get away from that, so I was just like, oh, okay, it settled down a little bit. I'm more on board. I feel like you end up seeing pretty much every angle of this theater, which is fine with me, because with films like Demons, like I, just referenced earlier, you see so much of the actual theater that you feel immersed in it. Like, it creates the environment that you're supposed to be feeling for the entire film. And I think it also kind of helps create this claustrophobic feel that helps you kind of, see what is being dealt with by the characters who are trapped in this theater with this killer, because it just then feels claustrophobic because it's not a big theater. And by showing you kind of every aspect of it, you really do feel like you know kind of the parameters of how closed in everything is. So I like that about it. They show a decent amount of clips of the movie in the theater, and it kind of makes me want to actually see the movie. So, yes, literally the movie that all the characters are going to see, they show a lot of it on the screen. And apparently it was a film that was done by, I think one of the producers was involved in the making of the film, so it was very easy for them to get the rights to show it. But it's some sort of like take on a Frankenstein that looks like it's kind of like a So Bad It's Good with really good gore effects. So I'm like, I kind of feel like I want to know what that is, which I had, when I was doing my research, I saw what the title was. So I can go back to that and go watch that film. But it exists. It's a real thing. They didn't just shoot parts of it for this film. All the characters interact with each other with a level of playfulness. It kind of helps to keep the mood very light and things kind of like moving and just keep it very fun. Nothing's too serious. It never seems very serious, especially with the way all these characters interact. Like, you just feel this light fun for the film, and it goes all the way throughout, which I enjoy. Note, there's an opera theater. Yes, I already called that. And the theater, the other thing I didn't say is the theater is called the Opera Cinema. So even further showing how ingrained the Dario Argento influence is in this film. There isn't any action until about 30 minutes in, but it does start with a bang. That's one of the things. Like, the pacing isn't the best in this, in my opinion, but once the killing actually starts, you become even more invested in it and more interested to see what's going to happen, which, that's pretty obvious that ends up happening. And then towards the end, like, the ending is quite good. It's a good payoff, but if it would have been tightened up a little bit in the beginning, I think that would have been better, but yeah. So you gotta wait about a half an hour till the killing actually starts. Like I said, the pacing isn't great. It does feel like things keep getting rehashed with characters, and that's not good since the characters are actually pretty thin themselves. They do flesh out a few of the characters a little bit, but there's not a lot of attention paid to them. It's pretty obvious that a lot of them are just there to be fodder for the killer, so time isn't really wasted in endearing you to them. Although I would argue it probably would have been better if you really did endear these characters to people, because then once they got killed, you would be like, oh no, I kind of feel for that. I like that character. But, it's kind of a mindless slasher in a sense, so it's just there for the killing fun. Lots of focus on the black gloves of the killer, early on at least. Which leads me to the whole, Dario Argento and Giallo-esque influence within the film. It's just one more of those nods, in my opinion. There's a cool shot involving an eyeball in it, and then another great gore scene involving an eyeball. So if you hate eyeball trauma type stuff, you might want to steer away from this film. I'm talking to you, Uncle Pete. I know that drives you nuts. Or you can just look away briefly because, like I said, this film is worth watching. I like those types of things in horror films. I think it's particularly gross. It doesn't actually make me squeamish. I just feel like it's not done a ton. And so when I see it done, especially in interesting and well done ways like in this film, I'm all for it. Good job with the lighting, since it's dark for basically the entire film. Like, even when they're outside, it's like raining and dark. Then they're inside, it's a theater, it's dark. So they did a really good job actually lighting enough so you can see everything you really need to within the film. Which, if you watch enough of my reviews, you know that one of my biggest pet peeves is when things are in the dark, not properly lighting things. So I really have to call it out when people have done a good job, and they did a good job in this one. About an hour and 15 minutes into this, when it is about an hour and 15 minutes into this, when you get more insight into the killer himself, which up until that point I was wondering, are we going to really know much about this killer? And that's why I was thinking like, oh, it'll be some sort of big twist. It's not. Like, that doesn't spoil anything about the film, honestly. But the hour and 15 minute mark, when you start to understand some stuff about the killer, like motivation and MO and stuff like that, that's when it gets more interesting. That's when this killer goes from being just like some stock slasher to being kind of a bit iconic in a sense, and one that I would like to see a franchise with. I won't tell you whether or not this film sets it up at the end for there to be another one or not, but regardless, even if it does or does not, there are definitely ways to write multiples of these types of things. I do wish, though, that the information about the killer hadn't been done so late in the film. I think it could have driven more interest in sticking with it with the pacing problems if people understood the killer much earlier. Because I think it also then ups the stakes for who's being stalked, in essence. There's one scene with some prolonged, pretty nasty sound design. I love that. I love when the sound design in the film jumps to the forefront, especially when it has to do with kills, or this isn't necessarily a kill, but it's like a post-kill thing. You'll see what I mean. But it's prolonged. The sound design, like, it gets in your ears, and for some people, it'll make you squeamish because they revel in how gross it is, honestly. And I was just really enjoying that. I was all about that. There's a shot that's repeated from the beginning of the film at the end, and it made me chuckle. I think it's really clever, and people who know, it has to do with, I'm not even going to say what it has to do with, but just note, there's a shot that's done from the beginning of the film that shows up at the end of the film. It's done a little bit differently, but the setting is the same, and I got a good chuckle out of it. I thought it was very clever to do that, and, it's just one of those little nuggets, little gems within the film that you enjoy. It nails the ending for the most part. It's a very good ending. Like I said, there is a nice payoff, even though there are some pacing issues with this. Quite a nice payoff, so you don't really feel like the time you put into it is wasted at all. Plus, it's not long. I think it's a little bit less than an hour and a half long. I think it's like an hour and 28 minutes, something like that. More than anything, this film is about the cool deaths. It is definitely about the cool deaths. It is about practical effects. It is about gore, and those things are fun. Those things are good. If that's what you're looking for in a film, this is for you. And the killer starts kind of but turns into one that I want so much more about. I already talked about it, but it bears repeating. I want more of this killer, or killers kind of like this. I think it's very interesting what they did. Particularly crazy, in my opinion. I like it. So, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give this a very solid 3.5 star rating. I like this film. I recommend this film. Like I said, when I watched it, it was on Shudder. When I'm doing this review, it's still on Shudder, so go check it out. Also, I would love to know your thoughts and opinions on this film, so go ahead and put it down in the comments. We can talk spoilers in the comments. Just know that, people. Spoilers are allowed in the comments, so let's go ahead. We can talk. Or if you just want to talk about horror film in general, we can also do that. Do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. I really do appreciate it when people subscribe. That is literally the best way for you to repay me if you like this video or any video I have ever done. It really keeps me motivated to keep doing these things because I'm not, at this point I'm not making money doing it or anything. So the motivation is subscribers. Also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, and I'm putting up about, normally 4 a week, sometimes a little bit more. Rare occasions, like 1 less, but it's usually 4. Anyway, thank you very much for taking your time to check this video out. I do appreciate that. And until next time, keep it brutal.